And we're recording. All right. So for today, I've asked everybody in one-on-ones, but I will ask again, review the 12.1 milestones board linked here, viewed here. It looks like, I mean, as of yesterday, everything was pretty much on track. Last night, the GDK Puma on by default and the GDK was closed. That was one of the big things we wanted to ship and start getting feedback on, so that's great. Everything else looks like it's on track, although I see a couple new issues added to the bottom there by Camille. So any changes need to be in by end of day 17th, so they're taken for final release. So just take a look, make sure it's all going to land for 12.1. If it's not, let's move it over or talk about whether or not we need to move it over, shift things around. Any questions on 12.1?
When will be the date when we should wrap up all the issues?
17th.
17th. Okay.
End of your day on 17th. And then on to 12.2. So Eric and I are talking about Puma and it being the highest priority thing that we should be working on right now. We threw a bunch of issues into 12.2. So take a look, make sure you understand or have any questions before we dive into 12.2. There are actually some issues for Puma that are under the infrastructure project that do not show up on our board. So I probably need to move the epic so it shows up on our board, or we just need to figure out how to track both of them. So right now, any issues related to rolling out Puma on dev.gitlab.org are not showing up on our board because they are in the infrastructure project. So we need to figure out a solution there. So any questions on 12.2? Cool. All right. Moving on to the next thing. So, GitLab values throughput over planning, but some level of planning helps. Other teams use weights, and I have created an issue for the memory team to talk about whether or not we want to use weights, what type of weights we want to use, how we want to implement it. So I would appreciate feedback from the team on how and what they want to adopt, how they want to adopt it, how we should use it going forward, if we should use it at all. I think having the weights discussion asynchronously is valuable because that way you ask questions before you jump into the issue. Like the Puma on by default in GDK, that one initially seemed like a fairly simple issue, and then it kept growing. And I think by asking questions up front and having the conversation, like, one person thinks it's super obvious, like this is very simple, and another person may think this is, going to take a week. And by having that conversation back and forth, you can ask some probing questions and maybe determine that the scope is larger than originally thought. And just having the team understand all the work that's assigned to the team is a good thing as well. So take a look. There's lots of links and references to how other teams do weights, and we can either adopt one of their models or adopt our own, or not adopt it at all, depending on what the team thinks. So take a look at the issue, LinkedIn, add your comments, add your thoughts, and we'll circle back by next week. Any questions on weights? All right. As mentioned, and Eric mentioned in one of the issues, Puma is our highest priority right now. We have created an epic for rolling out on dev.gitlab.org. Still trying to determine how blocked we are on this. Do we need permissions in the environments? Do we need help from infrastructure? Are we blocked on them? Jarv did get back to us on the issue where Camille pinged him. He said he could help and just ask questions. I haven't read through the entire comment, but he offered to help out. So figure out how we can get unblocked there. There is an issue in that epic to determine all the blocking and dependencies and stakeholders we need to work with to get it out on dev so that we can start getting some real world testing and figure out what complications Puma may add to our production environment. Questions, thoughts? All right, move on to the next one. Our labels are deprecated, or going to be deprecated. So the general memory label will be deprecated. You all can read the rest of it in that link. Right now, there's a bot out there that if we are missing the new, see, it's the stage label and the group label. So for memory team, our group label is just group : memory, and then stage, it's DevOps enablement. And right now there's a bot out there that if it just has a memory label, it will then add the new labeling on there. And all the new dashboards and everything will be updated with the new labels. We'll have to fix our boards within GitLab. I will fix them to make sure they reflect correctly. Questions on that one? All the information's in that link that I sent there, what we're doing, why we're doing, how we're gonna do it, what the timeline is. See, we're in the middle of the async retro. I know, Alexi, thank you. You've already added some thoughts there. I've added some. So the rest of the team, please continue to add yours. And also Alexi reminded me we should be using the workflow board. So it accurately reflects where the work is. A lot of our stuff wasn't even in development, even though I know folks were actively working on issues in the team, if you're not familiar with it. Here, and we have nothing in it. There you go. So just drag it along and the labels will be updated accordingly. Any questions? All right, Camille, you're up next.
So I started doing some Puma testing. You can find some of my thoughts. I am continuing updating this issue with the thoughts. I'm actually retesting after discovering why Puma performs slightly worse than I expected. So I will just continue updating that. Is there anything else to add to that? I think you have to read that. There is like a bunch of different informations about how it was tested on about what is the meaning of these results. They also include a bunch of the graphs about and also consider the performance implications that is not really Puma or Unicorn related, but it's like general thing that tries to analyze the graphs that are there. The second item is something that I would like us to start discussing about the performance quality tool, because this seems something that we are building for ourselves. And from my perspective, it would be better if we build that for everyone else except ourselves, but just be us to be a user of this tool on equal footing as everyone else. This issue, and Grant even started commenting on that, is proposing that we figure out the performance quality tool to be able to give some comprehensive benchmark for our customers or everyone in the team or everyone who wants to use that to validate how their GitLab environment is performing. And by having reproducible testbed, test scenarios that people would put into their GitLab, they would be able to use this tool to validate GitLab performance on different scenarios. Because there is so many different factors. Some of these factors are mentioned in the point number 3, that it's really hard to basically consistently validate the performance of environment. At first, this number is gonna be meaningless, but the more people start using that, we're gonna have more data points with different configuration, and then it's basically like a machine learning and classification on what data you see, what kind of deficiencies you see, system sees that this is caused by the environment that you're running in. And in general, my perception is that we should build a tool for others to use daily. I mean, developers, customers, support team, to have something comprehensive that would be able to test and get back to us with the, hey, this is the benchmark. It seems that this is off. We think that it's not gonna scale, and kind of follow something that we use ourselves for testing our environments. But we are not building just for testing our environments. We are building for testing just GitLab on much wider scale. It kind of tries to describe this idea in more detail and why we should do it. And I would really like to get your feedback, ideas on on this slightly different focus than we seem to have today with the performance quality. It's basically based on my expectation that everything that we do for the quality performance testing, I should be able to replicate that locally and should be able to compare that with the results that are posted somewhere. I should be able to understand what these results means to me and in what cases my system not gonna perform well. It also means that I want every developer on GitLab to use that to validate the code they are using and make every developer at GitLab to build scenarios as part of the development workflow and just provide them a tooling and understanding of this tooling and understanding of data that they see, because they're gonna be overflowing with amount of the data, what this data does mean. Because if you look at this another issue about the Puma, this is just a snippet of different metrics that you can get from the system. We should have probably twice more of the metrics that try to gauge behavior of the system from even different angles. And this kind of performance testing and understanding what it does mean, the data that we see, it's quite complex. But I think that the more open we put that tool, the more wide it's gonna be used. Should be way easier for everyone to use that. And this is my primary goal why I created this issue. I want basically everyone to use that daily instead of just us using that from time to time, maybe daily. But I want everyone to contribute to building this testing framework. This is my primary goal of introducing this issue and this slightly different focus.
Thanks, Camille. I think it's a great idea, and I haven't had a chance to read through it yet, but I certainly will.
Sounds cool, but what is the closest thing we have already for such measurements? You mean CI jobs, like performance ones?
What we do right now, we have a bunch of the different scenarios that are basically load testing of some endpoints, and we run them against a bunch of the environments. In the configuration that differs between environments in the test bed or test data set, there's slightly difference between different environments because it's additionally provisioned. So to some extent, it's very close, but it's not ideally comparable across them. So technically, what I would expect that the data set that you get, you have some data set that is predefined. If you put that on the equally performance two systems with similar specs, you should see the same results easily. And today, getting to this point it's quite hard to get. It's really quite hard to get to the point that you can, I don't know, provision new environment, or provision two equal environments in two different cloud providers and compare their relative performance. Because I think that we don't fully understand the meaning of the numbers. I think that the amount of data that we gather is just not enough to fully understand what these numbers does mean. Because, for example, the number that you see may basically differ, the meaning of this number may differ because of the factors on how you run this environment. I'm really basing that I really saw on some customers having so interesting configurations that it's gonna be really quite hard for us to replicate in some cases. I saw some customers, for example, having and it's quite common actually, having database Redis NFS servers externally. So it means that for each database call or each Redis call, you inject 1 or 2 milliseconds of the latency. We're not gonna be able to model all of that thoroughly, and it's quite hard to figure out exactly what is the impact of this injected latency on the behavior of the system if we don't have something that is comparable on these different environments, and it produces reproducible and predictable numbers on these environments. Because for example, we at GitLab.com usually run in the IDR scenarios. GitLab.com is sometimes not performing. not performing because of the application bug, but it's usually not performing because of the infrastructure. But our customers very often have the problem with the infrastructure, and we have very hard time pointing them that the infrastructure of them is really a problem. It's not the application the problem, but rather infrastructure. And our performance testing tool should also be able to point out that this is not the problem of the application, it's the problem of your infrastructure. And by measuring different types of the endpoints and the correlation between them, when we understand exactly how these endpoints interact with the system, whether they are maybe IO heavy because of the Redis, IO heavy because of the database, or anything else, we could really say, hey, your Redis is basically performant. You have to fix your Redis first before we can certify your infrastructure to be performant to run GitLab.com at that scale. This is basically this compliance performance testing by testing different systems from the different angles, you can basically very accurately measure why the system is not performant, or in what cases it's gonna break, because it's actually testing these different latencies that are otherwise very hard to test with the tool like a ping that you would run from the command shell. And secondly, I don't think that we want to run ping from the command shell. It should rather be I think customer being able to do that on their own and get back to us with the results. Hey, these are the results. Are they fine or not fine? And be able to understand that. This is kind of the vision behind that approach. If we have the tool that we use the same way as our customers, it puts us on the equal footing as our customers. It means that we are benchmarking our system against the same criteria as our customers. So we better understand the deficiency of the tool, also where it's underperforming in terms of the data that is being returned. So rather us being the center of the quality testing tool, I would say that our customers should be center of the quality performance testing tool, with us just being another customer. GitLab.com is just another customer, I think, in this case. This is the whole idea behind this issue.
This is awesome, Kamil. I just had a question about the data for determining this benchmark. See, different customers would have different kind of architecture. They would have different workers. They would have different memory and all that. Single number of threads that they are using, the Redis setup and all that. So is there an automated way that we would be able to pull that data in a completely automated fashion? Or would we be depending on the customers actually providing that data?
Absolutely. This is what we should do. It's getting benchmark means it's getting the numbers, it's getting metrics, and all your metrics also include all the data of how your customer system is configured. So you would get information about the number of Unicode workers, Puma workers, side nodes, how they are maybe even configured, what is the IO latency on the system. Basically, all of that, you already have that. We just only get to figure out what data we need, basically. And I started this, if you look at the screenshot in this is a set of 6 different metrics that I just pulled for my purpose. But technically, Craig, if you go to the determine configuration, if you open one of these screenshots in the new page. This is just a set of a few metrics, but technically we could get 2x, 3 times more these metrics that actually describe exactly the system behavior on system configuration, amount of the memory, amount of the CPUs, utilization of the CPUs outside of the GitLab. All of that is available for us. And this is something that we should also include, because kind of noisy environment of GitLab is also the problem. For example, often our customers run on the VMs. We should know exactly when we run the testing suite, what is the steal time on the CPU. So basically how much noisy environment is right now. So we have all that data. We only need to figure out what we need to annotate that even further. This was really like these graphs were basically tuned for my personal purpose. because this was something that like seemed interesting for me to validate the Puma. But like we have, as I say, 3, 5, 6 times more data if we would really want to.
Right,
No, that's great. Thanks, Camille. All right. That's it for the topics on the agenda today. Anything else anybody want to cover or any other questions? All right. Thanks, everybody.